I would like to take a step back to before you started your entrepreneurial venture. How come you ended up in this field in the first place? So, what made you? Did you want to be an entrepreneur when you were younger, or did that develop over time? How did that start?
Yes, it's kind of innate in me. I wanted to be an entrepreneur when I was young. So I remember when I was 17 or 18, I used to subscribe an entrepreneurship magazine, and I used to read about entrepreneurs. Basically, I I basically I like to prove that things that most people think say can't be done can be done, and I'm also a builder. So when I was very young, I love to play with Legos. So I have this builder part side in myself, but I also have this kind of side of someone wants to bring a new perspective, something new, something combine ideas in a different way to create something different. And I think Oceano Fresco is a reflection of those two elements.
Definitely. I completely agree. And actually, that's another thing then that we have in common. Because when I was 16, about, yeah, roughly 16, I was also starting, horrible English. I will try again. So when I was 16, I was inspired by all kinds of businesses that I saw. And for some reason, this wish to create a company and to build it and make it grow stuck with me ever since. And that's the one thing that did not change over the years. A lot of things have changed. That has not changed.
Yes, it's innate. Yeah, it's innate. When it's within us, sooner or later that will become so big that desire to build a company that eventually we we do it and we do that with jump and maybe do startups. So I guess maybe in the future I'll be interviewing you,
Who knows?
rising entrepreneurs.
I would be up for it.
Deal. So this is a promise for the future. But
Nice.
yeah, but I should say as well that I've started companies before. So I did small businesses when I was 18, even before then. When I was school, I was trying to always do some sort of businesses. But when I was 30, I think 31 or two, I started another real startup. So investment, dedication, etc., which went terribly bad. It was a disaster for me psychologically because I was so convinced that I was going to succeed. And it took 2 years that experience, but it was a defining moment, and what I learned with that experience helped me a lot in the way I've been dealing with Oceano Fresco. I've been managing Oceano Fresco.
How did the other experience shape you?
Um, First, to accept that failure happens, even if one works like crazy and does everything within his powers to succeed. So accepting that and learning how to deal with failure was very important. Second, I also learned techniques, way that one should use to manage a company, like how to manage the company cash, how to mitigate the risk, how to hire the right people, how to motivate them, um, and thirdly, also how to be flexible about decisions about the course of the company as the company develops. Because very often the initial idea it's not what ends up being developed established. You need to adapt the business model, and it helped me to become less dogmatic and just it doesn't need to be the initial idea. It needs to be what works.
Yeah, that's something they always teach you in theory as well. They call it pivoting if necessary, so that you need to adapt. Like if you figure out, okay, the project that you thought you were going to do is actually not the product that the market wants, you need to be able to adapt to that. Um, but like there's a big difference between in theory explaining, oh, you need to be flexible, but then in practice actually being flexible is a completely different story, because also from a yeah from you as a person, it demands flexibility, and that can be very difficult, I think.
Very, very. Being flexible is important, and it's also part of being learning how to be humble and understanding what's important in a startup, in any company, in fact, and more so in a startup because it's fragile, is that it's the we that matters. It's not so much the entrepreneur idea or some direction that he or she believes it's right. What matters is that the company succeeds, and to succeed needs to be the work of many people, being able to many people. That's something I also learned.
How do you feel about the fact that a lot of entrepreneurs are, well, or aspiring entrepreneurs are hesitating to talk about their ideas? Because they're afraid, most of the time, they are afraid that if they tell somebody their idea, that they may steal it, which, well, I can't understand that very well. But how do you feel about that? Do you think that people should be more open because ultimately the idea itself doesn't matter? Or, like, what do you think about that?
So the idea, I think the idea is value. Now the risk of someone grabbing that idea and implementing it before the original person depends very much on the type of idea. So the idea behind a fresco, it's very difficult to replicate because of what I explained before. Very high entry, a lot of time. Other ideas, which maybe on the digital world, are much easier and faster to implement. So having said that, I think very often um, ideas, that risk is the risk of being stolen are overvalued by the entrepreneur because it's the execution that really matters. It's very easy to pitch great ideas. Not very easy, but it, it takes much more effort incomparable, much higher effort to implement an idea than to pitch an idea. So I think there's a lot of value in entrepreneurs talking about their idea. It's for selected people in order to check if this idea is valid, to get the inputs to adjust the idea, and then and prepare the execution of the idea. So I would encourage entrepreneurs to talk about their idea to achieve these three objectives rather than stay secret and don't tell anyone, believing that this he or she has this gem, this diamond that needs to be protected at all costs.
I think you have a really good point there. Also, personally, I had the feeling a good, like compromise between telling everything and not telling anything is to first start talking to people that you have a lot of faith in, a lot of trust in, and to tell them first, like especially people where you care about their feedback or their opinion on what you're trying to do.
Mm.
I feel like that helps to.
Yeah, it does. It needs to be, of course, it needs to be, or it's better to be people that can give some constructive feedback on the idea itself, because it might be just family or friends who say, "Great idea, fantastic, I think you should do it." Sometimes they can say the opposite, but normally they try to be positive, and that can give us the wrong sense of assurance to the entrepreneur that the idea is wow, and it helps to be people that can have some critical thinking and say, I love the idea or not, but have you thought about so and so and so? And
Mm-hmm.
and and then move, as I think you alluded to, then gradually move to people that you're less comfortable with and discussing the idea. Still people that you trust somehow, they're not going to run, but to move to people that can be more critical because they're not so close to you emotionally. And that's, I think, very healthy.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Also, the more often you tell your story or what you're trying to do, the more confidence you gain, and then it also gets easier to be more open about everything that you're trying to do.
Yes. That's a really good advice. Just yes, to talk a lot about the story, to learn how to say the story and to pitch. In other words, it's really about practicing, and the more you do, the better you become.
Mm-hmm. It's also the same when I pitch people the idea for my podcast about them being a guest on the podcast. It's exactly the same, even though the podcast is not well a startup like, but it's exactly the same. So I'm also very very nervous, and I was even more nervous in the beginning last year when I started, and then I did exactly this that I just told you. So I started with just like 2 or 3 people that I knew they were not gonna be mean to me if they hate the idea. But so I started with them, and then I increased the number of people I explained my project to, and now it gets easier every time that I do it.
Oh, yeah, when you pitched the idea of a podcast to me, when you asked me if I wanted to participate, you seemed very natural.
Thank you. Then it's improving for sure. But I do improvise. It's I don't know. I always try to tell people the same so that it's consistent. But then again, it's different every single time. I don't know.
It's a good thing. Well, if you adjust, I guess you adjust to the potentially interview interview person, and also I guess your idea about your own podcast evolves.
Thank you.
Trying to do interviews in English, it was used to be in German, and probably there will be more changes. But I guess that's a good thing. It means it's maturing the idea.
Thank you. It's definitely very exciting.
Mhm.
Um, Now I forgot what I wanted to ask. Hmm.
Like we started talking about you, so tell me more about your how to revert the interview. So tell me what you want to do in your career.
Can you repeat the last question? I should tell you more about what?
No, I was joking. I was joking. I was saying that now I should ask you questions. It reversed the interview. I should ask you. So, Melissa, tell me what you want to do in your career.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, why not? So right now, actually, this is a very exciting time for the podcast, I think, because so this is the very first episode in English, and I hope that there will be many more next year. Well, by the time this is public, this is already next year. Um, but this is really exciting, and also the website is being redecorated and to reflect this entire transition to the podcast format. So I'm really excited about it and looking forward to how this is going to continue to develop.
Looking forward to follow you in and LinkedIn and hear your next podcast.
I don't really have any more questions, I think. But what I would still like to know from you is if you think of the next generation of founders or maybe other people that are like us that are dreaming about, building their own company, do you have any other message or advice or just something that you want to pass on to them that they should know? This is a tough one.
Yes. Mm, I would say my advice would be about how can an entrepreneur minimize the levels of anxiety. And one of the levers to do that is, of course, through proper cash management. And if there's one thing that is very important for the entrepreneur to do well, is to manage the cash position of his or her startup. So I would advise founders, future entrepreneurs, to learn about to manage and to forecast the cash position of the company and to manage it very carefully because it's very easy to be in love with the product or service and focus all the effort there and be completely thrilled when the first clients come in. But one needs to remember that in order for all of that to happen, the company needs to be funded. So keeping a tight grip on the money, on the cash position, is crucial until, of course, free cash flow break even. And that one will take some time and normally takes more time than one expected. So if there's one thing I would recommend for is to keep an eye on the cash position.
I think that is really good advice. Very valuable advice for sure.
Yes, that's something I didn't do well my first startup. So I learned the hard way. And the second advice would be about investing a lot in the initial team, in selecting the right people for the initial team. They make all the difference in the world. Once the company has 50 employees, it's not as it's still very important, but it's not a make or break. When the company only has 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 people, the quality of people that one brings into the company can make all the difference. It can be the difference between failing or succeeding. So I would suggest to do a thorough interview analysis and then on top of it follow one gut. So listen to the gut feeling and think, is this person really going to fit in? Is this person the right profile? Will he or she blend into the team and make the high performance team? And that's a very personal decision, of course, but it's worth investing time and reflection.
That is also really good advice. It's something that cannot be stressed enough, I think, with early stage startups. Getting the best people for the job. It's so important. It's incredible.
It's vital. I mean, in Oceano Fresco, that worked very well, and that basically uh, made the company reach where we are at the moment. And the other one, as I mentioned, didn't work well. So I can definitely see the practical consequences of doing it right or doing it wrong.
I completely understand. And I'm very happy that it did work out for you, and I hope that it will in the future, that you'll be very successful with the shellfish. I'm really excited to follow your journey. If any one of our listeners wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that? Is that possible?
Yes, of course. They can send me an email to Bernardo.carvalho, so my first and family name, and then at oceano-fresco.pt, or they can search me in LinkedIn and send me a message.
I will make sure to put the links to your profiles in the description box below the episode, so that people can find you. And yeah, the only thing that I can still say is thank you so very much for making the time. It was a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Well, the pleasure was mine, Melissa, and I'm honored to be the first one of the first English speaking interviews. I hope your podcast continues to be a success.
Thank you. Well, then, thank you everyone for listening to the podcast episode. If you haven't already done so, make sure to hit the follow button so that you will be notified about all future podcast episodes. And I wish you all a lovely day. Bye.